the mindset of the current entrepreneur that unfortunately in the last 5 years, you've seen this systemic issue where it seems like entrepreneurs think the goal or the mountaintop milestones are actually capital raising.
I absolutely believe capitalization as a founder, starting from scratch, is important. But I think determining that longer picture version of like, what does this look like in 3 years, 5 years, and not kind of reinventing the wheel on raising capital every year because, again, your operating is outrunning your revenue.
Welcome to Outsource to Profits. We have a fantastic guest. Julie, can you describe who you are, what you do, how you serve the world? And then we'll get into the topic of the week.
Yes, thanks for having me, Jamie. I'm Julie Richt. I'm president and founder of Lucid Insurance Group. We are a specialty commercial lines wholesaler and managing general agency, which I know a lot of people don't know what that is, but essentially we operate like an insurance carrier, but really focus more on the sales and the underwriting side of things.
Julie and I were talking offline about this controversial topic that we're about to discuss. I've owned 3 agencies and I've done the whipsaw of both. I've raised capital, I've taken on private equity investment, and I've bootstrapped. And I can tell you there's this concept, do you feed the baby, starve the mother, feed the baby? On that same topic, and this is about taking equity, taking more, not taking equity so you have the whole pie, or this kind of concept, do you want all of a grape or do you want a small piece of a watermelon? I have a friend who, after the sale of their SaaS software company, this sale of the SaaS software company was for multiple 8 figures. And at the end of the transaction, what he ended up with was a job. $0 was transacted to him. He got a 2-year job afterwards on the payroll because of what's called a pref stack or a liquidity preference that unfortunately, as he raised capital, he had to give it all to investors on a multiple of what the investment was. So, Julie, first question, can you describe what you and I were talking about offline on the mindset of the current entrepreneur that unfortunately in the last 5 years, you've seen this systemic issue where it seems like entrepreneurs think the goal or the mountaintop milestones are actually capital raising rather than the creation of a successful EBITDA flowing business?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that capitalization has been flush in the economy for people to rely on and go source. There's a certain process, but there are a lot of founders who start a certain way, kind of building an operation to which they want to get to. And there needs to kind of be a hybrid mindset more so of like, we got to have our backs against the wall a little bit where we want to eat what we kill, if we will, but we also want to have an established foundation where we can take care of our employees. Cause I think that's important. You're going to have more productivity and a better mindset coming in if your employees feel like the company is in a good position. So I absolutely believe capitalization as a founder, starting from scratch, is important. But I think determining that longer picture version of like, what does this look like in 3 years, 5 years, and not kind of reinventing the wheel on raising capital every year because, again, your operating is outrunning your revenue. I think that that's an important distinction is how are you going to get revenue generating in your first 2 to 3 years?
Can we back up to the origin of your current business? Mm-hmm. So you're now on a track and you're starting to grow. Are you project-based or MRR, ARR, recurring revenue?
Yeah, it's more of a recurring revenue. In insurance, everything gets booked a little bit different. So as we have a variety of different services we provide, whether that's property, workers' comp, there's a difference in how we book that revenue. So some is long tail, where you get 1/12 every month, and some of it is upfront as a seeding commission, and then you got to divvy out expenses.
Can you walk the audience through your mindset and your decision-making process? So you start growing. Bank account's growing, but you're running into working capital constraints. Mm-hmm. How did you start making decisions whether, okay, I have multiple options, I have debt, I have equity, and at what point you decided to peel off either decision? And when it comes to equity, do you take private equity money? Do you take venture capital money? Do you use angels, friends, family? Do you mind walking through a journey and a timeline on that decision-making process that you found to be a great mental model?
Yeah, I think what I did when I outlined the initial vision was what does 6 years looks like? Because I do think that your first two, those burn years are really about the foundation and getting established, right? But if I really looked at even 5 years, that might be a little short sighted because I'm hoping that hump is year 3 to 4, where we're converting 100% working on income and not having to capitalize anything outside of that. And so that's where I came up with that magic number of, okay, if I wanted to operate this business and I'm looking at it on a 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6 year term, what's the total amount of capital versus equity I'm willing to forego, but still give everybody a solid return on their investment? So I did kind of get my ultimate. So like I know what my cap is that I want to raise and I don't want to go outside of that. And obviously things can change that if there's different advancements in the business, but I'm talking solely on what I knew was my revenue generating opportunities, not like building any tech or other infrastructure, right? And then I went to what could I start with? What could I get by with for 2 to 3 years? So I think it's more about don't just look at the right now. Don't look at I just need to get moving and move forward and take something, but then really look at your 1 to 2, your 2 to 3, and your 3 to 4, and then your 4 to 6.
Yeah, and you basically took the next question. You had deferred gratification already planned out.
Yeah.
And you knew that there would be, especially in your year 1 to 2, there's going to be lean years to the point
Yeah.
you might not even have paid yourself. In agency 3 of mine, didn't pay myself for a year and a half. Used sweat equity and retained earnings from previous agencies to be able to fund this next agency. At what point did you start to analyze? And there's this beautiful balance between as profit comes in, how did you start to analyze the optionality you have of working capital? Do you deploy it back into the business for growth or for optionality of building up retained earnings so you can get more working capital through a bank financing? Or versus decided to pay dividends to yourself? How did you balance the reality of there's mounting pressure inside your own home for sweeping it into retained earnings, but then also saying to yourself, I'm not going to raise capital just so I can sweep this money back into myself. I'm going to use it as growth capital for an extra turn of leverage. Walk everybody through that decision making process.
And in this venture that I'm on, so this is the second kind of founding a venture that I'm in right now. I'm in year 2. So we are right now not turning that profit where we need to be. And that is where we're making that decision where, okay, at what timeline will we? And we do want to deploy it back into the business because again, we're looking for that exponential growth. So even as I set the table with initial angel investors, friends and family that did come on board with Lucid, the goal is let's position this for 5 to 6 years for X kind of return. So taking anything out of that or allocating it to dividends or anything like that, our priorities, and as I raised money with friends and family, was, get the business established, but take care of the employees to where they are healthy and happy and providing more and more to the business to grow. Because the exponential turn, at least in my business economics, is going to be that year 3 or 4, where you go from turning maybe, 5, 6x to 10, 12x to then, above that even. So that 3rd to 4th year is really critical for us. So everything that we can turn as net income is going right back into the business to be able to flourish the revenue.
Do you have any particular affinity to debt versus equity as a means of capitalizing the business and or from your previous experiences in other businesses? And maybe talk about why you chose one over the other.
Right. I think, as you know, everything's circumstantial to some degree, where it does make sense in a shorter term time frame to maybe take on some debt versus giving up equity. I think you got to know your position in the marketplace, that either where the revenue is going to come from, where that debt can be turned into, a downstream effect onto your liabilities, and you're being able to pay that down. And again, converting that into revenue within a 24 to 36 month cycle is extremely important. And I do think that a lot of people kind of think we can always keep extending that, or we can consolidate the debt. And that's just bringing in more investors, or you're losing more equity to obtain more debt if you're doing that. So again, it's got to be kind of circumstantial on like, what are your overall goals? Is this a patch that it's not if, it's when? Then I think debt can make sense. If you've got things already in motion to make the revenue come into the door. If you're needing debt to just keep the lights on, that's a scary position to be. And you probably want to give up more of your equity longer term to get in a bigger piece of the pot of capitalization to ensure that you can get that foundation and basically fill those cracks that may exist.
I 100% agree. Knowing what I know now, owning 3 agencies, 1 project-based revenue, 1 reoccurring revenue, 1 now 100% recurring revenue, debt and its ability to facilitate that debt is paramount to your business model. Mm-hmm. And I took on debt in a project-based business, which is not advised, because you will have moments of glory, of massive amounts, a swing of revenue. But what do you decide to do? You decide to continue paying down the debt using the repayment schedule. Yet that's not actually how your revenue comes in.
That is not.
Your revenue is a yo-yo. And so you took that money, you deployed it in a million different ways, and then you catch yourselves in these moments missing payments. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have a recurring revenue model, and as long as you anticipate that you will grow that recurring revenue, you have great net retention revenue, then you have a serviceable model to paying it back.
And I think it's important to know your product or your revenue position in whatever business that you align with. So if your business is aligned to somebody else's P&L as an expense that is foregoed if other things change in their business, that's something you've got to start hedging your bet against up front, and like how much you're willing to take that risk up front or debt, or how you're going to pay that down. In my space, obviously, insurance is a requirement for a lot of businesses to function. So it isn't, fortunately for our model, it isn't something that can always be minimized on a P&L. It can move, and we have attrition up by all means, right? We still have to service the business and earn that retention, but it's at a pretty calculable rate, where in other industries, you've got to be cognizant of that. Is my service something somebody else, when they're caught in the same position I am, would eliminate?
You have a wealth of knowledge around this particular topic. Is this an acquired skill or a born with skill?
Oh man. Well, I will say experiences of everybody's past, it definitely plays into this. So I think that you have to take these experiences from your past and call it learned behavior, right? But I do think that there is a sentiment about vision and strategy and how you go about handling those situations. That is probably more of an innate quality of certain people and of entrepreneurs, people that are pretty, prudent and seen. But there's no business owner or no founder that is not a risk taker, right? That's why you get into it. So it's more about knowing your strengths individually. And then honestly, I think building the repertoire of people around you that can help protect some of that.
Fantastic. How do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more, both about your insurance business and just to pick your brain?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Julie Richt, I guess. And I'm on LinkedIn mostly. Is probably the best place to get me. But our website is www.lucidins.com. So you can also find our contact information there too if you want to reach out.
This was a fantastic episode. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you.